Imagine a call resounding across medieval Europe, rallying knights, peasants, and nobles to a sacred mission. Reclaiming Jerusalem from Muslim control. This was the spark of the Crusades, a series of religious wars that spanned nearly 2 centuries. Reshaping history, driven by faith, ambition, and the promise of salvation. Thousands embarked on perilous journeys to the Holy Land, battling for control of sacred sites. These conflicts forged new connections and conflicts between East and West. In this video, we explore the origins of the Crusades and the monumental First Crusade. Welcome to the War Vault. The Crusades, launched in the late 11th century, were a transformative chapter in medieval history. Born from a volatile mix of religious fervor, political ambition, and cultural clash. By the 1090 SS, the Byzantine Empire, the eastern remnant of Rome, faced existential threats from the Seljuk Turks. A dynamic Muslim power conquering swathes of. In 1071, the Seljuks' victory at Manzikert crippled Byzantine defenses, prompting Emperor Alexios V Komnenos to appeal to Pope Urban II and Western Christendom for military aid to reclaim lost territories and protect the empire. Pope Urban II seized this opportunity not only to aid a Christian ally but to unify a fractured Christendom under papal leadership. At the Council of Clermont in 1095, Urban delivered a fiery sermon urging Christians to take up the cross and liberate Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslim control. He promised spiritual rewards, forgiveness of sins, and eternal salvation, igniting a wave of religious zeal that swept across. His call framed the crusade as a sacred pilgrimage fused with warfare, appealing to the devout and ambitious alike. The Crusades were driven by more than faith. Europe in the late 11th century was a patchwork of feudal states, plagued by internal conflicts and economic strain. Knights, often landless younger sons, saw the crusade as a path to wealth, status, and divine favor. Peasants, burdened by poverty, were drawn by the promise of salvation and adventure. The Church, seeking to redirect violent energies from European feuds to a holy cause, offered indulgences, making the crusade a spiritual and social outlet. The allure of pilgrimage to Jerusalem, a city revered by Christians, Jews, and Muslims, further fueled the movement. The response was overwhelming but chaotic. The so-called People's Crusade, led by charismatic figures like Peter the Hermit, saw thousands of poorly equipped peasants and townsfolk march toward the Holy Land. Lacking discipline and supplies, this ragtag force was massacred by Seljuk forces in Anatolia in 1096, a grim prelude to the challenges ahead. The main expedition, the First Crusade, was led by nobles like Beaumont of Taranto, Raymond IV of Toulouse, and Godfrey of Bouillon. This better organized force, numbering around 35,000, crossed into Byzantine territory in 1096, bound for the Levant. The First Crusade was a grueling test of endurance. The Crusaders faced long marches across unfamiliar terrain, from the Balkans to Asia Minor, enduring heat, hunger, and disease. Supply shortages and internal rivalries between Frankish, Norman, and Byzantine leaders threatened to unravel the campaign. Yet, their shared faith and determination drove them forward. The capture of Nicaea in 1097, after a tense siege, marked an early victory, bolstered by Byzantium. The siege of Antioch in 1097-1098 was a brutal ordeal, with crusaders enduring starvation and assaults from Turkish forces. Their eventual triumph, aided by a traitor within the city, showcased their resilience. The climax came in 1099 with the siege of Jerusalem. The city, sacred to three faiths, was heavily fortified by its Fatimid Muslim defenders. The Crusaders, reduced to around 12,000 by losses, faced scorching heat, scarce water, and fierce resistance. After weeks of siege, they constructed siege towers and breached the walls on July 15, 1099. The victory was marred by tragedy. The Crusaders massacred much of Jerusalem's population, Muslims, Jews, and even some Christians, in a brutal rampage that shocked contemporaries. This dark episode, while celebrated by the victors, left a lasting stain on the Crusades' legacy. The fall of Jerusalem established Christian control over parts of the Levant, leading to the creation of Crusader states, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, County of Tripoli, County of Antioch, and County of Edessa. These fragile outposts, governed by European nobles, relied on fortified castles and constant military vigilance to survive in a hostile region. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, centered on the Holy City, became a symbol of Christian triumph, but also a lightning rod for Muslim resistance. The First Crusade had profound effects. It demonstrated the power of religious ideology to mobilize diverse groups, from knights to peasants, across vast distances. It also strained relations between Western and Eastern Christians as Byzantine Crusader tensions over strategy and territorial claims emerged. For the Muslim world, the Crusade was a shock, prompting calls for jihad to reclaim lost lands. The victory opened trade routes, bringing Eastern goods, spices, silks, and knowledge to Europe, fostering cultural exchange. Greek and Arabic texts, preserved in Byzantine and Muslim libraries, reached the West, laying seeds for the Renaissance. The Crusades set a precedent for religious warfare, launching a cycle of crusades and counter-crusades that lasted nearly 2 centuries. It reshaped the medieval world, forging new connections between Europe and the Near East while deepening divisions. The Crusader states, though short-lived, became hubs of cultural interaction, blending Frankish, Byzantine, and Islamic influences in art, architecture, and governance. The First Crusade's success was a testament to faith, ambition, and sheer determination, but it also sowed the seeds of future conflict. The Crusader states faced constant threats from Muslim powers, setting the stage for legendary figures like Saladin to rise in response. The interplay of war, diplomacy, and cultural exchange defined this era, leaving a complex legacy. Join us on the War Vault for Part 2, where we'll explore the rise of the Crusader states, the emergence of Saladin, and the epic battles that shaped this turbulent period. Follow this saga of faith, conquest, and resilience as we uncover the next chapter of the Crusades. The First Crusade's capture of Jerusalem in 1099 marked a Christian triumph, but it was only the beginning of a precarious experiment. The Crusader states. These feudal kingdoms, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, County of Tripoli, Principality of Antioch, and County of Edessa, were European outposts in a hostile Levant, surrounded by Muslim territories. Their survival hinged on European reinforcements and navigating a complex web of alliances and conflict. Amid this struggle, Saladin, a formidable Muslim leader, unified opposition, reshaping the Crusades. This era was not just a military clash, but a profound cultural encounter, blending East and West. The Crusader states were governed by European feudal systems, with nobles like Godfrey of Bouillon and Baldwin I establishing hierarchies of knights and vassals. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, centered on the Holy City, was the most prominent, its rulers crowned in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. These states ruled over diverse populations: Muslims, Eastern Christians, Jews, and European settlers, creating a cultural mosaic. Governance required balancing Christian authority with local customs, often through pragmatic alliances with Muslim and Byzantine neighbors. Fortified castles like Crac de Chevaliers symbolized their defensive posture but could not mask their fragility. The Crusaders faced relentless challenges: supply shortages, internal rivalries, and constant threats from Muslim powers like the Seljuk Turks and Fatimids. Maintaining these outposts demanded frequent reinforcements from Europe, which arrived sporadically via perilous sea and land routes. The state's survival also depended on military orders like the Knights Templar and Hospitallers, whose disciplined warriors guarded key sites and supported the fragile Christian foothold. The turning point came with Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known as Saladin, a Kurdish leader whose rise transformed the Crusades. By 1174, Saladin had unified Egypt and Syria under his Ayyubid dynasty, consolidating Muslim power. A skilled diplomat and warrior, he framed his campaigns as a jihad to reclaim Jerusalem, rallying diverse Muslim factions. His leadership combined military prowess with chivalry, earning respect even from Christian chroniclers. In 1187, Saladin struck a decisive blow at the Battle of Hattin, near the Sea of Galilee. Exploiting Crusader overconfidence, he lured their army, led by King Guy of Jerusalem, into a waterless plain. Saladin's forces, including archers and cavalry, surrounded and annihilated the Crusaders, capturing the true cross, a sacred relic, and killing or imprisoning key nobles. The defeat crippled the kingdom of Jerusalem, leaving it vulnerable. Saladin swiftly marched on Jerusalem, capturing it after a brief siege in October 1187. Unlike the Crusaders' massacre in 1099, Saladin allowed many inhabitants to ransom their freedom, showcasing his emphasis on negotiation over slaughter. The fall of Jerusalem shocked Europe, triggering the Third Crusade, 192, led by Europe's most prominent monarchs: Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. The campaign aimed to retake the Holy City. Barbarossa's death en route weakened the effort, and tensions between Richard and Philip hampered unity. Despite fierce battles like the Siege of Acre 1189-1191, where Richard's engineering and naval support secured a costly victory, the Crusaders failed to recapture Jerusalem. Richard's tactical brilliance shone in battles like Arsuf, but Saladin's defenses held firm. In 1192, a truce allowed Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem, securing coastal cities like Jaffa but leaving the Holy City in Muslim hands. The Crusader states were not just battlegrounds but cultural crossroads. The influx of European settlers introduced feudal institutions, Romania's architecture, and Latin liturgy visible in Jerusalem's churches and Antioch's fortifications. Yet, Crusaders adopted Eastern practices, from Arabic medicine to Byzantine silk garments. Trade flourished, with Italian merchants from Venice and Genoa establishing networks that brought spices, textiles, and manuscripts to Europe. Arabic scientific texts, including works on astronomy and mathematics, reached the West, influencing medieval scholarship and laying groundwork for the Renaissance. This cultural exchange was mutual. Muslim chroniclers noted European customs, and Islamic cities like Damascus absorbed Frankish influences in art and architecture. The Crusader states became hubs of linguistic diversity, with Latin, Arabic, and Greek mingling in markets and courts. This interaction fostered a degree of coexistence, as seen in trade agreements and intermarriages, though religious tensions persisted. Despite their cultural vibrancy, the Crusader states were inherently unstable. They relied on intermittent European support, which often arrived poorly coordinated. Internal divisions, rivalries among nobles, and disputes with the Byzantine Empire weakened their cohesion. Muslim powers, reinvigorated by Saladin and his successors like the Ayyubids and later Mamluks, maintained relentless pressure. The state's small Christian population struggled to govern diverse regions, and their dependence on fortified strongholds made them vulnerable to prolonged sieges. Later crusades like the Fourth, 412-02-204, veered off course, with crusaders sacking Christian Constantinople, further straining East-West relations. The enthusiasm of the First Crusade waned as logistical challenges and political rivalries among European powers, England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire, undermined unity. By the 13th century, the Crusader states were shrinking, with Edessa falling in 1144 and Antioch weakened by internal strife. The Crusader states' legacy is complex. They demonstrated Europe's ability to project power across continents, driven by religious zeal, but also exposed the limits of sustaining distant outposts. The cultural exchanges they fostered enriched both Christian and Muslim worlds, from advancements in navigation to the spread of philosophical texts. Yet, the Crusades deepened religious divides, leaving a legacy of mistrust that lingered in Christian. The clash of cultures during this era, epitomized by Saladin's victories and the Third Crusade's stalemate, set the stage for the Crusades' decline. The interplay of faith, warfare, and diplomacy defined the Crusader states, creating a fleeting but impactful chapter in medieval history. Join the War Vault for Part 3, where we'll explore the final Crusades, the fall of the last Christian strongholds, and the enduring impact of these wars on Europe and the Middle East. Follow this saga of faith, conflict, and cultural exchange as we conclude the epic story of the Crusades. The Crusades, spanning from 1096 to 1291, were a monumental clash of faith, ambition, and cultures, reshaping the medieval world. After nearly 2 centuries of warfare, the Crusader states in the Levant crumbled under Muslim reconquest, marking the end of large-scale Christian presence in the Holy Land. The decline of these outposts, culminating in the fall of Acre, signaled the close of the crusading era. Yet, the Crusades' legacy, cultural exchanges, religious divides, and political transformations continued to influence Europe, the Middle East, and beyond, leaving an indelible mark on history. The Crusader states, Kingdom of Jerusalem, County of Tripoli, Principality of Antioch, and County of Edessa, were fragile from their inception in 1099. Surrounded by hostile Muslim powers, they relied on fortified castles, military orders like the Knights Templar and Hospitallers, and intermittent European reinforcements. By the 13th century, internal divisions, dwindling support, and the rise of formidable Muslim dynasties eroded their stability. The Mamluks, a military elite who seized power in Egypt and Syria after overthrowing the Ayyubids, posed the greatest threat, determined to expel the Crusaders. The fall of Acre in 1291 was the final blow. Acre, a bustling port and the last major Crusader stronghold, was a vital hub for trade and military operations. Defended by Templars, Hospitallers, and European knights, it faced a massive Mamluk siege led by Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil. The Mamluks, with superior numbers and advanced siege engines, bombarded the city for weeks. In May 1291, after a fierce defense, Acre's walls were breached. The ensuing battle was brutal, with streets turned into killing fields. Survivors fled by sea, and the city was razed, ending the Crusader presence in the Holy Land. The loss of Acre extinguished the dream of a Christian Jerusalem. Smaller expeditions persisted, like the Crusade of Nicopolis in 1396, but lacked the scale and zeal of earlier campaigns. Europe's focus shifted inward toward political consolidation and the emerging Renaissance, while Muslim powers solidified control over the Levant. The Crusader states, once symbols of Christian ambition, became a memory. their castles crumbling under Mamluk and later Ottoman rule. The Crusades' legacy, however, extended far beyond their military failure. They were a catalyst for cultural and economic exchange between East and West. Crusaders, returning to Europe, brought exotic goods, spices, silks, and sugar, transforming diets and trade. Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa grew wealthy as conduits for Eastern commerce, their fleets dominating Mediterranean trade routes. This economic boom fueled the rise of merchant classes and early capitalism, laying groundwork for Europe's commercial revolution. Intellectual exchanges were equally significant. Crusaders encountered Arabic and Byzantine scholarship, including texts on medicine, mathematics, and astronomy preserved from Greek antiquity. Works by Aristotle and Ptolemy, translated in Muslim and Byzantine centers, reached Europe through Crusader contacts, sparking intellectual curiosity. The transfer of knowledge, particularly through Sicily and Spain, influenced medieval universities and set the stage for the technologies like the astrolabe and advances in navigation also entered Europe, enhancing exploration. Religiously, the Crusades deepened divisions. The brutal conquests, notably the 1099 Jerusalem massacre and the Fourth Crusade's sack of Christian Constantinople in 1204, left scars. Muslim chroniclers recorded Crusader atrocities, fueling calls for jihad, while Christian rhetoric demonized Muslims, entrenching mutual mistrust. The Crusades also intensified anti-Semitism in Europe, with Jewish communities scapegoated during periods of fervor, as seen in the Rhineland massacres of 1096. These tensions shaped Christian, Gus, and Christian-Jewish relations for centuries, contributing to a legacy of religious conflict. Politically, the Crusades reshaped Europe and the Middle East. In Europe, the papacy's role in launching crusades initially strengthened its authority, rallying Christendom under a spiritual banner. However, failures like the Second and Fourth Crusades eroded papal prestige as secular rulers prioritized national interests. The Crusades bolstered the warrior class, with military orders like the Templars becoming powerful institutions. Their wealth and influence, however, later provoked royal backlash, leading to the Templars' dissolution in 1312. In the Middle East, the Crusades galvanized Muslim unity. Leaders like Saladin and his Ayyubid successors became icons of resistance, their victories at Hattin and Jerusalem inspiring future generations. The Mamluks, by expelling the Crusaders, established a powerful empire that dominated the region until the Ottoman conquest. The Crusades also influenced Muslim military tactics, with greater emphasis on coordinated cavalry and siege warfare, as seen in Mamluk fortifications. The Crusades were an early experiment in globalization, bringing distant cultures into sustained contact. Trade routes expanded, connecting Europe to the Levant, Persia, and beyond. Cities like Antioch and Acre became melting pots where Frankish, Arabic, and Byzantine influences mingled, visible in hybrid art styles and intermarriages and trade agreements fostered limited coexistence, though religious zeal often overshadowed these interactions. The Crusades' decline reflected their inherent challenges. The Crusader states' small Christian populations struggled to govern diverse regions, and logistical difficulties, long supply lines, and unreliable reinforcements hindered sustainability. European disunity, with monarchs like France's Louis IX prioritizing prestige over strategy, undermined later crusades. The Seventh and Eighth Crusades, 1248-1270, led by Louis, ended in failure, with his capture in Egypt and death in Tunis. The rise of the Mongols and Ottomans further shifted regional power, rendering crusading obsolete. The legacy of the Crusades is complex and enduring. They demonstrated the mobilizing power of faith, but also its potential for division. The wars introduced Europeans to a wider world, fostering curiosity and commerce that propelled later exploration. Yet, they entrenched stereotypes and animosities, some of which persist in modern Christian. The Crusades also shaped European identity, with tales of chivalry and sacrifice inspiring literature and national myths, from the Chanson de Geste to the legend of Richard the Lionheart. In the Middle East, the Crusades left a dual legacy. They strengthened Muslim resolve, with figures like Saladin symbolizing unity and resistance. However, the destruction of cities like Acre and the displacement of populations caused lasting disruption. The Crusades' cultural exchanges, though born of conflict, enriched both regions, from the spread of Arabic numerals to the adoption of Eastern textiles in European courts. Today, the Crusades remain a contested chapter, viewed through lenses of heroism, fanaticism, or cultural exchange. They highlight how faith, ambition, and conflict can intertwine, producing both destruction and creativity. Understanding this period illuminates the historical roots of modern intercultural dialogues and tensions, offering lessons in resilience, adaptation, and the complexities of global interaction.